This lesson will review asking questions to draw conclusions in poetry. You could use this lesson to draw conclusions not just in poetry, but any type of fiction. Do you know what poetry and science have in common? In science, based on your prior knowledge, you develop a hypothesis. You then conduct experiments. You study the results of those experiments, connect them, and look for patterns, and then you determine whether or not your hypothesis was true. In this last step, you draw conclusions. The same is true for reading poetry. You've already read the poem, reread it, and paraphrased, and you have some idea as to what the poem is or might be about. You now would create a hypothesis of what you think the author's purpose is. You're going to ask questions, look for patterns and connections, and draw a conclusion about what the author was trying to express in the poem. The three most basic questions you should ask are: what details does the author or poet include and emphasize? How are the details related? And what do the details mean altogether? It's quite possible that you will have to ask and answer additional questions, some to get to the answers of these three questions, and you may have to ask questions beyond these three to really draw some good conclusions about the author or poet's purpose. The first question we're going to tackle is: what details does the author or poet include and emphasize? And we're going to use a familiar poem. Nothing Gold Can Stay by Robert Frost. Some of the details I noticed Robert Frost includes and emphasizes in this poem is references to nature. Here you can see I've highlighted all of the references to nature. Another connection or pattern I see in the details are references to colors. Here you can see where I've highlighted references to color. Lastly, I see some connections and patterns in details related to time. One more pattern I see is in the language and the use of words that suggest things becoming lesser. It subsides, sank, and goes down. Lastly, it's a good idea to label what you've highlighted so that you can remember that later. The next question you want to ask is: how are the details related? I know that we labeled them on the previous page, but this time we could think about how they're being labeled and what exactly connects these words together. The first pattern I noticed was the words referencing time. So words such as first, early, hour, dawn, day, and stay. Most of these words reference the beginning of day, especially first, early, and dawn. These words that reference the beginning of day are paired with positive diction. For example, green is gold, heart is two to hold, leaf's a flower. But then when you see the words day, hour, and stay, they're paired with negative diction, such as but only, so an hour, leaf subsides to leaf, Eden sank, dawn goes down, and nothing gold can stay. These negative pairings suggest that the words day, stay, and hour are less desirable. A connection between the words that are colors, green, gold, and hue, is that all of these details are describing nature. The pattern in the words referencing nature, such as the word nature, green, leaf, flower, Eden, dawn, and day, are all references to gardens or springtime scenes, especially when you look at them paired with the words referencing time. There's no reference to nature such as water, weather, or any of the wild animals, or forests, woods, scary or dark parts of nature. Lastly, the pattern with the words related to lesser or lessening, such as subsides, sank, and down. These words all describe the time after the beginning, so they're seen after first, early, or dawn, suggesting that this time that happened after the beginning or after the first is considered less valuable. The last big question you can ask is, what do the details mean altogether? One thing you can do is look for connections, again, between the words. We saw connections between nature and time and the words that related to lesser and time. When we think of nature and time and we're referencing the first, early, or beginning, even though the poem doesn't mention the word spring, we immediately think of springtime. The use of the words Eden with the lesser words like subsides, sank, and down all suggest the fall of Adam and Eve from the Bible. If you are familiar with the fall of Adam and Eve from the Bible, then you know that this also relates to the idea of loss of innocence, because when Adam and Eve were tempted in the garden and they ate the fruit from the tree of knowledge, they essentially lost their innocence. If you connect the colors to the idea of time, then you can come to the conclusion that new beginnings, remember green can be a beginner, and we're talking about nature's first green, that these new beginnings are golden. This topic is contrasted at the end when it says, nothing gold can stay. The idea that when things are new and just beginning, they remain in that golden state for only a short period of time, not forever. These, of course, are not the only conclusions you can draw from this poem. In any given piece of literature, any reader can draw different conclusions from the text and the way they interpret the text. It's possible that the way you've answered the questions throughout the activity may have led you to different conclusions. What's most important is that the conclusions that you have drawn can be supported by the evidence in the text. As you draw conclusions from the poem today, please make sure that you're trying to get to what we would call the theme or the author's purpose for writing the poem.